We have a tentative agreement approved unanimously by your elected local council presidents. Flight attendant leaders from across our airline stand behind this agreement after fully reviewing all of the details.
We stand behind this agreement because it's our turn. It's our turn to lead the industry. It's our turn to experience the promise of this merger. It's our turn to enjoy the new flying opportunities made possible with a combined airline. And it's our turn to come to work together, knowing we have built a solid foundation for our future.
The heart and soul of unionism is solidarity. Flight attendants standing together to fight for common objectives. Nowhere is solidarity tested harder than in merger negotiations, where we come into it with different histories and different cultures. But at the end of the day, we are all flight attendants.
We share common objectives of control against arbitrary assignments, solid scheduling with pay protections, and compensation that values us as flight attendants, the faces of United Airlines. This agreement is about standing together and having each other's backs.
We stood up to attempts to divide us and came out with an industry-leading agreement.
The final decision is in your hands. Your vote will determine how we move forward together.
Our new single pay scale, if ratified, will lead the industry. On date of signing, the new pay scale alone will lift pay on average from 25% to 29%. And over the life of the agreement, flight attendants on average will experience an increase of 46% to 49%. This does not include international override or other pay factors. We have been underpaid for our work for far too long. If ratified, our new pay rates will go into effect with the September bid month. These pay factors will also affect every other area of our compensation, such as 401k retirement contributions, profit sharing, vacation value, and all other pay factors associated with our pay rate for each year going forward.
There is a new single base pay scale with base rates topping out in the 13th year at $62 and moving to $67.11 throughout the agreement. For flight attendants who are still moving through the pay scale, remember to include your anniversary raise when looking at the wage chart. Look at date of signing and move down a step for your anniversary raise. Then move over to the next raise at date of signing +1, so you can see where you would be throughout the scale in the contract. The international override is $2 per hour for pairings outside the continental US and Canada. We also have incentive rates paid for every block hour flown in excess of 200 per calendar quarter, to a maximum of 330, including vacation and deadhead. White flag pay is 150% of the pay rates. Purple flag pay is a new concept that designates specific trips at 150% of the pay rates. The pay stays with the trip through any subsequent trades or reassignments. Drafting pay is an additional 3 hours added to the trip. Flight Service Leader, or FISL, formerly International Purser, or ISM, is $7.50 per hour. Purser pay ranges from $1 to $4 depending upon the type of flying and aircraft type, and this is no longer a qualified position. Holiday pay will be paid for 5 holidays, including a flight attendant's birthday. Language qualified pay is $2.50 an hour. Short crew pay is an additional $7.50 per hour paid to each flight attendant for each crew member absent compared to the published staffing guidelines. Domestic per diem is $2.20, international per diem is $2.70, and these rates will increase by 5 cents every 2 years ongoing. Deadhead is full pay and credit with the ability to deviate with pay. Training pay is 3 hours flight time per day, and deadhead to and from training is also paid up to 5 hours each way. Vacation pay is 3 hours and 15 minutes per day. FISL override paid as well. Your vacation accrual is based on your start date with the company. Flight attendants may elect flex vacation to take an additional 7 days unpaid vacation, bid with the rest of the vacation time. And flight attendants may opt to fly through vacation to maximize earnings. Profit sharing is 10% of pre-tax earnings for the previous calendar year and 20% of pre-tax earnings that are in excess of the pre-tax earnings for the previous calendar year. There is no end date to profit sharing. Check ourcontract.org for additional compensation and expenses, hotels, and transportation information.
For our scheduling and legalities, we work to combine the best provisions of all 3 contracts. A merger by definition involves change. There may be provisions in here you may not be familiar with. That's to be expected. These negotiations involve a complicated balancing of interests among our flight attendant group and much hard work getting the company to agree to our priorities. Our tentative agreement combines industry-leading reassignment and restoration of days off rules from the CAL and CMI agreements with the rigs and solid scheduling parameters from the United Agreement to produce one of the strongest scheduling systems in the industry, along with the instant trading system. This was not easy to do. For years, we fought SMISAC-era negotiators who sought to impose the worst of all three scheduling systems. We rejected that approach and worked very hard to preserve pay protections and ensure flexibility is in the hands of flight attendants. Each valuable provision we care about in different contracts had to be negotiated to apply across the entire combined group, and each item was hard-won as part of the total cost of improvements in the agreement.
Pay guarantees include rigs of a minimum of 1 hour flight time pay for each 2 hours of duty, a minimum of 5 hours flight time pay for one duty period pairing, a minimum average paying credit of 5 hours per day for pairings with multiple duty periods, a minimum 1 hour flight time pay for each 3 hours and 30 minutes away from home. Line guarantee is now pay protected for the value of your line and trips. No loss of overs or trip value. The minimum line guarantee is 71 hours for line holders. Flight time limitations restrict the company from working line holders over 95 hours and reserves over 100 hours. This should not be read as a cap because line holders can opt to fly to 100 hours or more than 100 hours, and reserves may opt to be flown to 105 hours or more. It is the flight attendant's choice to opt or not, and this may be done during bidding or at any time during the month. 1 day off in 7 is 1 day off in 7 days. It requires a calendar day off at home on domestic pairings. With international pairings, it requires either a calendar day off at home or 24 hours free from duty while away from base. This legality may be waived at the option of the flight attendant. Minimum days off are 10 for a line holder and 12 for a reserve. Flight attendants have the option to waive below these minimums as long as FARs are observed. Flight attendants may not be scheduled in excess of these domestic duty times. For duty days beginning 1900 to 0459, there can be no more than 7 hours flight time and 2 hours and 30 minutes ground time. Also, if any portion of the flying is between 0200 and 0400, there can be no more than one segment after the red-eye flight. The high-value trips must be a single duty period, with at least 9 hours of flight time and no more than 3 legs. International maximum duty time is based on flight time including deadhead. Domestic legal rest at the home domicile is 12 hours free from duty, which can be reduced to 10 hours for trading and picking up trips at the flight attendant's option. On a layover, domestic minimum legal rest is 10 hours free from duty if the hotel is within 15 minutes of the airport, and 11 hours free from duty if more than 15 minutes away. In all cases, there must be a minimum of 8 hours rest at the hotel, and there can be no contact at layover points for the first 8 hours. International layover minimum legal rest is based on flight time. Remember that these times do not mean all layovers will reflect these minimums. Arrival and departure times simply do not allow for that, and the company typically schedules in buffers to protect against delays or cancellations. International home domicile minimum legal rest is based on flight time and deadhead time in the last duty period. And a reserve is guaranteed 24 hours minimum rest after an international pairing of more than 5 days. The tentative agreement includes trading between flight attendants as soon as lines are awarded for the month. Instant trading with open flying begins on the 23rd of each month for the next bid month. Check the schedule timeline chronology for details. Bad day, worst day trading is permitted. This means trading a trip on a bad reserve coverage day for a trip on a worse reserve coverage day. Reserve coverage is displayed in the computer system in real time. Trades for fewer days, partial trip trades, out-of-base trades, jetway trades, line holder trades with reserves, personal drops, and personal time off are all included in the agreement. Reassignment and restoration of days is based on the current Continental and CMI contract language that leads the industry with strict reassignment timelines, pay protections, pay incentives, and restoration of time off.
While reserve is a reality in the world of aviation, we sought to make it something that would give those on reserve more flexibility, choice, and greater control of earning potential. One of the very last items on the table was reserve days off, and we told the company we would not leave reserves behind in this agreement. The agreement here preserves the 12 days off currently included in the United contract and provides the ability for reserves to choose to pick up more time on days off. Reserve's 78-hour guarantee and $2 override provides greater income than the current 83-hour guarantee with 10 days off in the Continental and CMI contracts. A major company initiative was to include reserve movable days in which the company can assign reserves into days off without penalty. We beat back those attempts for a system which clearly defines the process and provides incentives for flight attendants by offering 5 additional hours of pay on the first day above the guarantee and 200% pay for volunteering or being assigned into the second day off. Improving reserve contractual provisions was a top priority for our JNC and the joint MEC, because reserve is not a junior issue, it's a flight attendant issue.
Reserve guarantee is 78 hours pay and credit with a $2 reserve override per credit hour and 12 days off. A straight reserve system will be used with the exception of Frankfurt, Hong Kong, Honolulu, London, and Narita, which will operate on an A-B rotation system. Reserve preferencing will be used to assign trips with detailed parameters for the company to follow, including time of assignment and greater control for reserves to preference the type of flying they want to do. Reserves may not be scheduled to exceed 35 hours in 7 days, unless waived by the flight attendant. 35 and 7 does not apply to international assignments, but does apply to a mix of international and domestic pairings. Reserves can be worked into a day off under strict parameters with pay incentives. There will be at least one block of days designated as set days, and assignments cannot be made into this block. Reserves may be assigned into the first day of other blocks of days off, but first to a volunteering reserve and then in time accrued order. Whether volunteering or not, the reserve will be paid an additional 5 hours of pay and get the day off restored. The same parameters must be followed for assigning into a second day off, and then whether volunteering or not, the reserve is paid 200% for the entire pairing, as well as restoration of the days off. Days off are restored at the end of the block of days off. This process provides a penalty to the company and clear guidelines in an effort to decrease the likelihood of these assignments and to compensate the reserve for the inconvenience. Every attempt will be made to assign a ready reserve at least 3 hours prior to report, and all reserves will be given round-trip assignments. Reserves must attempt to get to the airport for a short call-out, but will not be penalized if assignment is made less than 3 hours to report time. Standby reserves, also known as Airport Alert, will receive 5 hours pay and credit if they do not fly. A standby assignment is for 4 hours, with assignments departing no later than 5 hours after reporting for the assignment, except to avoid drafting. Reserves will also be able to trade trips with line holders and pick up trips on days off to increase their guarantee and pay for the month. When picking up from a line holder, the reserve is treated as a line holder throughout the course of that pairing, including line holder reassignment rules if necessary.
Our benefits, medical, dental, and other insurance comprise one of the core economic components of the agreement. And in total, our benefits are industry-leading. This tentative agreement preserves a separate flight attendant-controlled health insurance plan and provides access to a variety of other options, including build-your-own plans. Flight attendants will continue to have access to HMOs, although the impact of the 80-20 cost-sharing will increase the amount they pay for these plans, with a 4-year phase-in to the same level of contributions that will apply for all the contractually required plans.
The required medical plans include Core Medical PPO, Core Medical EPO, Core Medical High Deductible Health Plan and Health Savings Account, Traditional Medical PPO, and Select Regional Medical Plans. The summary details specifics for flight attendants based in Guam, Hong Kong, Narita, London, and Frankfurt. Additional optional medical plans will be offered by the company, including build-your-own plans. The plans include 80-20 cost sharing, and HMO cost sharing will be phased in through 2020. Annual premium increases are capped at 9.25% per year. Plan terms for required medical plans cannot be changed without AFA approval. The dental plan options are the Standard Family Dental PPO, and optional dental plans. Check the summary booklet or ourcontract.org for greater detail and explanation. Also included at the site or in your booklet, you'll find details on sick leave, long-term disability, company-paid life insurance, and group universal life insurance.
Retirement plans accrue a benefit over the course of an entire career. In general, for the whole flight attendant group, changing plans mid-career would interrupt that retirement benefit. For example, for someone who already has 25 years of service, starting in a new defined benefit pension plan would not provide time to accrue a meaningful benefit for retirement at age 65. Our goal in these negotiations was to equalize the benefits of the different flight attendant groups, while the company sought to achieve a common plan for all newly hired flight attendants. We utilized retirement specialists, actuaries, and our benefits committee to review the plans and ensure the benefits paid to flight attendants were equivalent, and we were successful in negotiating that in this tentative agreement. This required substantially increasing the contribution to the IAM NPP for the CMI flight attendants, and an additional 2% contribution to the United Defined Contribution Plan, which many of you refer to as the 401k plan. Management originally wanted the additional 2% contribution to be an employee match, which would require a contribution from the flight attendant as well. We were successful in making this increase a direct contribution from the company, which does not require an additional contribution from flight attendants in order to receive it. It was also critical that we maintain the option of retiree medical for United flight attendants close to retirement, so that anyone who retires within 15 years of ratification will qualify to retire with the retiree medical provisions available through the contract they work under prior to ratification. Going forward, all newly hired flight attendants will take part in the Defined Contribution Plan, or 401k. In addition, we achieved a letter of agreement that requires the company to explore the possibility of establishing a defined benefit pension for the next generation of workers.
I think every flight attendant, regardless of whether you're from CMI, UA, or Continental, should be very, very proud of the commitment and compassion that emanates from each of the members of the JNC representing our combined group. We fought together very, very hard for every single section in this TA. You have to know the company didn't want to give us half of what's in this TA. The company just wanted to take all the good out of each book and rip each contract apart. It was a fight right up until the last minute. We pushed them well beyond what they wanted to give us. I would ask everyone to take a look at the entire book and what's been achieved here with the combination of 2-3 different cultures. So make a decision on what's right for you and your family, and not galley chatter or Facebook chatter. So thank you for your time, thank you for listening.
The duration of the tentative agreement is 5 years with a 1-year early opener. Our scope language ensures work belongs to AFA flight attendants on the United System Seniority List, which protects our jobs. There is also a no furlough letter of agreement for all flight attendants on the System Seniority List at the date of ratification.
This tentative agreement is unlike any other in our careers. There are new terms and new concepts for everyone. We will remain available to answer all of your questions throughout the ratification process to ensure you can cast an informed vote.
We encourage you to review each item in the tentative agreement and consider it on the whole as well. Negotiations occur within the context of what is happening in the industry, the larger economy, and the political climate as well. All of these factors are important as you make your decision for our future.
Flight attendants deserve a joint collective bargaining agreement to obtain all of the benefits of a fully integrated airline, and which reflects our hard work on the front line of United Airlines. Now is the time to move forward. Ask questions, get answers, and cast an informed vote.
And always remember,
We are stronger and better together.
This is our time.
We welcome you to the AFA-CWA webcast for the 2016 United Airlines Tentative Agreement. We are coming to you live from the CWA building, and our webcast company was working furiously to fix the audio so that you can hear the live comments from your JNC today. We're just blocks from the United States Capitol, and you are making history today by joining the largest ever AFA meeting. Thousands of members are online right now from around the world, and as our good friends in Guam would say, half a day to all. My name is Sarah Nelson, and I serve as the International President of our Flight Attendant Union. Joining me here is your Joint Negotiating Committee, our professional negotiator and attorney, Joe Burns, who is our AFA Director of Collective Bargaining and served as the chief spokesperson at the table over the last year, along with one of our financial and industry analysts, Matt Barton of Flight Path Economics. Over the next hour, you will hear about a tentative agreement that, if ratified, will be an industry-leading contract. The agreement is worth well over 3 times as much as United Airlines wanted to pay just a year ago. On average, it is a $380 million annual increase in cost to United, over and above the cost of the current 3 contracts. That's a total of $1.9 billion more for flight attendants over the course of the 5-year agreement. That also has a 1-year early opener. So now we'll get to your questions. The first question is coming from Chicago. It's about profit sharing. It says Section 4N1 says the union will advise the company whether in lieu of a cash distribution, flight attendants' profit sharing distribution should be made as an additional direct company contribution to the flight attendants' 401k plan accounts. Does this mean that AFA will be deciding how I get my profit sharing? Randy, can you take that?
No, each individual flight attendant will make the determination how they want their profit sharing to be paid, be it in a direct deposit into their account or into their 401k. And also with this profit sharing in the new tentative agreement, there's no sunset date. So this profit sharing is year after year after year as long as the company makes a profit.
Thanks, Randy. So we had this question yesterday, and we've received this online as well. It's about 3K and an emergency assignment. And so flight attendants are wondering what an emergency actually means. Kevin Lum, can you take this?
Sure, Sarah. 3K is language that we took from the United contract in total and put it into the new joint agreement. This is a good time to point out to everyone that what the JNC was trying to do in as many cases as possible is find language in any one of the 3 contracts that worked for us and import the language in total so that it would bring with it the meaning and history from the previous contract, and we could use it going forward. So specifically to 3K, the emergency assignments that they're talking about in this particular section is not just because flights are late or there's a cancellation or something that the scheduling department thinks is an emergency. It's actually a real life emergency. And the last time we used it on the United contract was in 1989 for the San Francisco earthquake. And the earthquake basically damaged or destroyed a lot of the airport and shut the operation down there. We had a great number of passengers who were stuck in the terminal. And this section allowed the company to use pilots and some supervisors, other employees who were qualified to sit in the jump seats just so that we could get the plane loaded with passengers and away from San Francisco and get people out of that bad situation. And that's what the emergency situations are calling for in that particular section.
Thank you, Kevin. And it's especially important to reiterate the fact that this is bringing language and the history with it, as you said. So we have a question that's very similar from Ricky and Rebecca asking about opting to maximum flying, both for line holders and reserves. And they want to know how is that done, and can a reserve or line holder change their mind in the middle of the month and opt to maximum flying later? So Jack Candy, can you take that?
Sure. So line holders have a 95-hour maximum when they start the month, unless when they bid, they choose to say that they are opting to 100 or over 100. The other option is also when a line holder picks up a trip from open flying or trades with open flying or with another flight attendant, or picks up a trip from another flight attendant and goes over that particular maximum. So if a flight attendant picks up a trip that brings them to 96 hours, then they have opted to go over 95. They still have the 100-hour maximum. If they pick up another trip that brings them over 100, that brings them to 102 hours, they have opted to go over 100. For a reserve flight attendant, when they start the month, they would have a maximum of 100 hours, unless, again, at bidding, they would have opted to go to 105 or over 105. They have another option anytime during the month. They can also call scheduling and tell them they want to opt. I think there's one more provision two more provisions when reserves are opted, is when they trade their assignment after they've been assigned with a line holder, and if there's a difference of 2 hours, they can have a difference of 2 hours between the trip that they traded, and if they increase the time in their line, then they are considered to have opted. The other situation when they would have opted is, as a ready reserve, they choose to indicate that they want to fly maximum. They would have been opted to over 105.
There's a lot of choice in how people can opt. So we got this question from many, many people, and we've just tried to put it into one question together. It says, I realize there's a lot of choice for line holders to pack in hours in less time to have more time off, but what are the protections in place for reserves with this type of flying? Ken Diaz, can you take that?
Sure, Sarah. There are protections for reserves. There's 1 in 7 day protection. There's the ability not to be scheduled more than 35 hours in 7 days, unless, of course, the individual reserve waives that provision. There's also the 12 hours free from duty rest at home, and there's also a 24-hour free from duty rest at home if coming off international pairing more than 5 days.
Thanks, Ken. And, there's a lot of people who want to understand how this industry-leading reassignment language works. And I'd like to ask Carrie to walk us through this reassignment language that the Continental and CMI flight attendants are so familiar with. But that really is something very new for the United flight attendants after years of complaints about 8J. Carrie, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure, Sarah. We have the best reassignment language in the industry. The main bullet points are that you cannot be reassigned into your days off, and that you do not have to continually call back the next day for your reassignment. If you're on a trip that ends up going into your days off, you're entitled to restoration of days off with pay, and that's no matter how many days off that are in your line at that time. You're entitled to restoration of days off with pay, where you can either choose to pick another trip within 90 days. Say you flew into 1 day off, you can go and within 90 days choose a high time 1 day trip to drop and keep the pay with concurrence with scheduling. Or if you want an immediate amount of money, you can choose to take 5 hours of additional pay in lieu of restoration of days off. Also, if your reassignment ends up getting done more than 2 hours after the original time that you were supposed to get home, you will get reassignment pay, and that's $15 an hour for every hour past the time that you were supposed to get back.
Thanks, Carrie. I just want to get a little bit of perspective from our Director of Collective Bargaining, Joe Burns, because he also was the lead in the American negotiations and has a really good perspective on the industry. Joe, how do these reassignment and restoration of days and the scheduling provisions stack up against other contracts in the industry?
I think if you look at what was done in these negotiations is the JNC was able to take the very good, as Carrie has indicated, industry-leading rescheduling and restoration of days off language from the CAL and CMI contracts, which is language you don't see in other agreements, and put that together with the very, very strong rigs and protections that come out of the United Agreement and put them together in a scheduling system that stacks up against any other scheduling system in the industry. It truly is industry leading. And that wasn't an easy task because you faced a management team who, for a long time, wanted to take the worst out of both contracts. They argued that you couldn't fit the provisions together. But through some very hard bargaining, the team was able to put together a very solid scheduling system.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. We have a question from Maggie. The time frame of the TA implementation has been discussed for 12 to 18 months. What rules kick in immediately? What contracts do we work under while the scheduling implementation is being worked out? Kevin Lum, can you take that?
Sure. The implementation of the contract is going to be addressed and covered by an implementation letter of agreement, which you can find in the back of the contract. It'll be in the back of the TA that you can see online. And it covers how the new contract is going to be put in place. Currently, pre-merger United Airlines flight attendants scheduling is handled on the Unimatic platform, and pre-merger Continental flight attendants scheduling is handled on a crew management system which sits on a platform called Cosmos. In order for the bulk of the newly agreed to scheduling provisions to be implemented, we all have to migrate to one common platform, and United has decided to utilize the CMS platform going forward. And it is expected that moving all flight attendant populations to that one platform and reprogramming the platform for the new contract provisions will take 12 to 18 months. The implementation letter of agreement establishes a joint implementation team made up of AFA people and company people, and the team will oversee the implementation of the entire contract, taking into consideration flight attendant priorities and company priorities for when provisions begin to start or phase in. And you will see when you look at that letter of agreement, there's a complete list in back of it, which shows when each part of the contract will phase in. I think of most important note to flight attendants is that the pay provisions will begin the first full bid month after the tentative is ratified. So if this agreement is ratified in August, all of our pay factors, higher pay factors, will kick in on September 1.
Okay. Thanks very much, Kevin. And, we have a follow-up question to that, and that is, what if the company drags their feet? Joe Burns, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there's really 2 points here. The first is that we negotiated language in the side letter of agreement that has union involvement in the process, as Kevin indicated, but also has a process that we can go to arbitration so we can have an outside neutral party make the determination of whether or not the contract is being implemented in a timely fashion or whether we have any disputes. The second point is that the way this deal is structured economically is, as Kevin indicated, the wage increases and the economic increases come up at the front of the agreement. The company, in contrast, would get savings from the synergies of the merger only after the flight attendant groups are combined with the common crew management system. So the company has an economic incentive to move forward with the implementation, and the longer it goes on, the longer it takes them to get the synergies from having common pairings and so forth.
Thanks, Joe. We have a question. How does the 7-day vacation flex days work? This is a new provision for pre-merger United. Ken Diaz, can you explain this, please?
Sure. Thank you, sir. The flex vacation was taken from the Continental CMI contract, and what it is, it's an additional 7 days of vacation. During vacation bidding, you would have the chance to indicate whether you wanted to take an extra 7 days of vacation the following year. You could either take that as unpaid vacation or paid vacation. How it would be paid vacation is you would have 1.9 hours deducted from your monthly paycheck so that when you got to the vacation, you would get the vacation pay for those extra 7 days. So it's a great addition to the vacation bidding process that we adopted.
Thanks very much, Ken. And Jack Haig, there's a question that came in about, give us a couple of examples of notable changes for CMI flight attendants.
A couple of things that come to mind are job security for all those based in Guam, the ability to transfer off-island, which we've never had before. Other improvement is no transitional duty, and one of the bigger ones, as with other international domiciles, we will now be covered by the Illinois Workers' Compensation Act, which was going to be huge for those in Guam.
Great, Jack. Thank you very much. And I just want to note that no transitional duty is actually for all flight attendants, not just Guam, but these were some specific notable items that may be of interest to flight attendants in Guam. Thank you. Jack Candy, we got this question at the end of the Dulles Roadshow yesterday. I'm just going to read it. As a pre-merger United flight attendant, I use the PPO, and I'm thrilled that AFA was able to keep our flight attendant-specific plan. I understand that we will continue to pay 20% of the cost of the premiums, but now with the new 9.25 cap on increases each year. What about our deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums? Did those stay the same? And if so, can you remind everyone what they are? Because my chiropractor is always amazed at how low they are compared to his other patients.
So that is correct. The annual deductibles will remain as they are currently in the traditional PPO, and that would be $250 for single, and that would be $500 for family. What is also remaining the same is the annual out-of-pocket maximum, and that's $1,500 per single and $3,000 per family. We have protected the features in the traditional PPO, but we have also added options for all flight attendants on the seniority list.
Thanks, Jack. Okay, so we have with us Matt Barton, who was our one of our financial analysts and industry analysts, giving us a perspective on the costs of our agreement and how it matches up with competitors and helping us to work through the costing items with the company. And I'd just like to ask, Matt, can you give people a little bit of your background first?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my name is Matt Barton. My company is Flight Path Economics. And I've spent about 20 years in the aviation industry in various capacities. I started off as a planner for an airline, and since then I've been a financial analyst and an economist, and also actually an investment banker working on airline-related transactions. And I've also worked for lots of different parties in different transactions. I've worked for creditors in airline bankruptcies. I've worked for airline management teams. I've worked for aircraft manufacturers. And I think, in this case, I've been called in to assess the merits of this tentative agreement, and that's what we're here to do. So,
thanks, Matt. And we actually have a question for you that came in. United Airlines is making record profits. Is this expected to continue, and how does United stack up against Delta, American, and other international carriers?
So there are a couple different facets to that particular question, and I think it's worth reiterating or starting off by saying, why is this a good deal right now? First of all, as we've heard, this deal, this TA delivers substantial value to the flight attendants, roughly $16,000 on average per person per year. That is an exceptional amount. The vast majority of that value comes in the form of cash. That's not an accident. That's by design. And so, this deal really is industry leading in all respects. It's better than the deal at American. It's better than comparable deals elsewhere in the industry. Now, the second part of this is not just why is this a good deal, but why is this a good deal right now? Okay, it's true. It is actually true that United Airlines is doing exceptionally well right now. All right, in 2014 and 2015 combined, the company generated over $7 billion in operating profit. Okay, the 2015 operating margin was about 14%. And to put this in context for you, this is a number that has never been achieved in the past. Certainly the volume of money that's been generated in operating profit, that $7 billion I mentioned, that hasn't been generated cumulatively since 1990 by the combination of these two companies. So this is an extremely unusual time that we're in. And you got to ask, why are we in this particular time right now? What's going on? And there's a couple different reasons for that, and it weighs on the answer to the question. And one of the answers is, look, we've had consolidation in the industry, and so there's been a lot of ability to shrink systems and constrain the amount of capacity and bring up prices. The second factor is that fuel prices have been a lot lower in the last few years. And the third factor, which is really important, is that the economy in the United States is now in its 7th year of sequential growth. This is really unusual, and all three of these things may not persist indefinitely into the future. So the risks that we're looking at into the next year, 2 years, is that fuel prices are more than likely going to come up. We've already seen that fuel prices have started to come up. We've also started to see that airlines have started to exercise less capacity discipline in the last year or so than they have in the past. That means more empty seats on flights, for instance. That's one way that you would recognize that. And then finally, in the wider economy, we're seeing that the economy is starting to soften substantially. And in fact, if you had to look at pretty much all of the metrics and tea leaves out there to evaluate how the economy is doing now and how it's going to potentially do in the next year or so, you'd find that almost all of those signals are pointing to a softening in the economy. And why does that matter? Well, the short answer is that everything that United can do as a company and with respect to any potential tentative agreement is closely tied to how well the economy does in the United States. So if the economy softens, then United Airlines isn't in as good a position as it was in the past. And so where does that take us? Well, I think the key thing is that right now we've had 14% operating margins in the last year, basically. Historical operating margins are closer to somewhere between 2 and 6%. So if we even just revert to that historical average, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if we were to revert to that historical performance, the company would potentially not be in the same position in terms of affording the sorts of contract increases that are currently on the table for this TA. So to sort of wrap that all together, the conclusion that I get to after having assessed the merits of this contract is that if you do this deal now, it's at a point in time where it may not be repeated, potentially not be repeated, if another TA comes along in the future. So this is a good time to get a deal done and conclude it.
Thanks very much, Matt. Okay, so Kathleen, said another way, you were there, obviously, in the final hours of bargaining. Do you believe we got every last dollar out of United in this negotiations?
I absolutely do. Just to reiterate what was stated earlier, we pushed them to over 3 times what they were willing to spend just a year ago. And I have to say I was incredibly proud and inspired by the unity, the solidarity that the JNC showed to make sure that nothing was left on the table.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. We had a question come in about downtown-like hotel language. This is new for Continental and CMI. Randy, can you explain what this language means? Why downtown-like? Why not just downtown? What does this do for flight attendants?
Downtown-like hotels, one of the things that's important to flight attendants, especially if you're on a long layover and they put you in a location you don't have access to food or entertainment. This ensures that when the company goes out and they meet with these hotels and they look at the surrounding areas, if it's not in a downtown location, it's in an area to where that you have access to many things, be it shopping, be it food, be it entertainment, and you're not sitting in your hotel room the entire time.
Great. And of course, we locked in those hotel standards that the AFA Hotel Committee will use, and they're a part of that process in selecting those hotels.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So let's see. Okay, we've had this question in a lot of different ways, but it says, it really does look like the JNC put together some of the best provisions of each of the contracts. But there are things that a lot of us are used to that are no longer there.
And so, tell us about some of the challenges in putting these contracts together. And Kevin Lum, I think you gave a really good example yesterday at the Dulles Roadshow.
Sure. So to sort of retell what happened in Dulles yesterday, a comment was made that, there are things that are different in the TA from what flight attendants are used to seeing in their respective contracts. And I think, quite frankly, the statement was made, you said there would be no concessions. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that, first of all, a concession is certainly depends on who's looking at it as to whether it's a concession or not. It's sort of in the eye of the beholder. And as the example, we'd like you all to take a look at, if you have the summary that you got from the website, that the one that looks like this, you would look at page 9. And if for some reason you have the summary that looks like this, it is page number 12. And we're going to look at the provisions for international layover minimum legal rest for our example. And if you look down the column at the line that talks about flight time of 14:01 to 16 and a half hours, and you can see that it's 22 hours rest free from duty. Under the current United contract, that provision provides us with a minimum legal rest of 33 hours. Under the Continental contract, that flight time would get a minimum legal rest of 12. So that is the situation that the JNC faced from the very beginning, that we had two different contracts that addressed things that we're all familiar with in two different ways. You have one airline that has 33 hours rest and one airline that has 12. And where were we going to go? Couldn't really get everyone to agree to the 33, and we couldn't get everyone to agree with the 12. So we met in the middle at 22. And ironically, everybody kind of looks at that as a concession. And so we're sort of asking everyone to take a step back and look at these things in a different way, and that it's not that there was a right way or a wrong way to do things, in this case minimum legal rest. It's just that we did them differently, and in order to put the contracts together to go forward, we've chosen, in this instance, 22 hours, and we think that that is a good way to address both groups of employees going forward, and we've done that with as many sections as possible to get the best benefits we could out of both books.
Kevin, thanks very much. A lot of these questions really lead to what we have also gotten several times. What if this TA does not ratify? And Joe Burns, could you walk us through that?
Yes, I'm going to answer this based on my experience of years of negotiating in the airline industry. And if the agreement was not to ratify, then we would have a process to determine the reasons why, or the main reasons why we believe that the TA did not ratify. And that's somewhat difficult because obviously every person has their own reasons for voting. We would approach the National Mediation Board to attempt to have a discussion about setting up dates. We are under mediation, so it's important to remember that the National Mediation Board controls the timing and location of negotiations per the Railway Labor Act. What that means concretely here is that the National Mediation Board would determine when we got back to the table, and they would determine the timeline of the negotiations. From other negotiations where tentative agreements have failed to ratify, our experience is that the National Mediation Board will really want to know that we have a limited number of issues that we are attempting to renegotiate. They really do not want, ongoing negotiations where we think we're going to be redoing the entire contract. So you get to go in with a handful of issues. In some of the previous negotiations, we've had a very, very short period of time, maybe 48 hours, a couple different times to negotiate another tentative agreement. The other factor that you have to face is that the company has the amount that they were willing to spend in this tentative agreement, and we were able to push that number way higher than they wanted to, even at the very final hours of negotiations, to get that up to a $380 million number. Typically, the companies in the face of a failed TA are not necessarily willing to spend more money or not likely to spend more money. So what you end up doing is you end up identifying flight attendant priorities, maybe moving the money around, changing it somewhat, but the numbers that we talked about earlier of the $15,000, $16,000 per flight attendant, that doesn't really change. It's just typically that's just a question of how it gets distributed. So really, just to conclude this answer, I think the most likely scenario would be it would take a number of months to get to initial session with the company again, and we don't know exactly when we would get another TA, but based on experience, it could be up to a year. And certainly if you look at the mechanics negotiations, I think that kind of backs that analysis up.
Thanks, Joe. I think we've worked together on several negotiations, and I should note that I think you were referring to some that we're very familiar with. For example, at U.S. Airways, when we had narrowed down those issues to get back, but still the NMB was not scheduling dates, and it actually took putting out a strike vote to flight attendants with a 94% return, high participation in favor of a strike vote to actually get the NMB to believe that we were serious and bring us back to the table. And so another thing that's really important as you're weighing this agreement is the issue that I really care about, or the set of issues that I care about, something that my flying partners across the system also would care about, that could be one of those handful of issues that we would go back in and try to change. And would they be willing to vote to strike over that issue? Those are important things to ask within the context of the process that Joe just explained. So we have some more questions. We've had a couple questions on uniform. There's been some concern about the fact that the buying power with the Continental process can actually get more uniform pieces than the United process. And Carrie, can you just let us know what we did on uniform points and the language on uniform?
Yeah, sure, Sarah. For uniforms, we made sure we put the strong uniform language that is much more comprehensive from the pre-merger United contract into the tentative agreement. But in addition, we wanted to make sure that the strong buying power that we have currently on the pre-merger Continental group was brought forward into this TA2, and we did achieve that. So we're going to go forward with the same buying power that the Continental flight attendants have today for uniform replacements.
Okay, great. Thank you. And actually, I'm going to ask you the next question, too. We're both familiar with this one. It's about maternity. And the question is that the TA states that the maternity leave will be up to a year. Is that a voluntary option? And if so, does it affect my seniority?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, we made sure to make sure that pregnant mothers, once they have their babies, have the option. It's definitely voluntary to take up to 12 months off after the birth of the baby, with no loss of bidding seniority. And I'm going to have to look up the amount of days for company adjustment. But there's no loss of bidding seniority.
There's no loss of bidding seniority. Yeah. The seniority that's impacted would be the seniority for purposes of pay and vacation accrual, but it would only be impacted after 270 days on maternity leave. So for the first 270 days, no impact on seniority at all.
Great. And then, Jack, I just want to affirm that the provisions that we've had in place that are specific to countries outside of the U.S. remain in place as well.
We do have letters of agreement regarding London maternity provisions, and there's also something similar with Frankfurt, and they do remain in effect. They would remain in effect in the joint collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you. Okay, we've had a lot of questions about the Flight Service Leader Program. When will that go into effect? Who is eligible for it? And how can you get into it or decide not to be in it? Ken, can you take that?
Sure. First, let me say that the under the pre-merger United contract, international qualified pursers and under the Continental and CMI contract, international service managers, known as ISMs, they would be grandfathered into the new program. The new program would not start for implementation until we're all working on a common platform. So approximately 6 months before that date, there will be a list in each location that the company will put out as to how many FSLs are needed in that subbase in that location. There'll also be a separate list of all of the qualified flight attendants that are FSL qualified and their seniority dates. At that time, you would make the decision, once you know about the program details, to bid into the subbase at that location. You will then, the awards will come out, who becomes part of the FSL subbase. Those that do not, if there's more qualified FSLs than there are positions, would retain their qualifications for 2 years. But at the initial part of the transition into the new program, you would have priority if there were openings in other locations to go into the FSL subbase at a different location if you so choose. So that's how the FSL would originally transition.
Okay, thanks very much, Ken. And Morna, can you tell us up to when can flight attendants cast their vote on this tentative agreement?
Sure, you can cast your vote online or by telephone, and you have the ability to change your vote at any time, and it's up until August 12th noon, Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, thanks very much. Matt Barton, I think that this is actually the last question. As a financial advisor, do you believe that AFA made the right choice as opposed to other employee groups who decided to not take certain things in their contract in order to get a signing bonus? Do you believe that AFA made the right choice to put all of that money actually into the contract as opposed to the signing bonus?
Well, absolutely. And one of the key reasons for that is that these contracts are amendable. They don't ever disappear. They're not terminated. And so what was put into the contract in place of a signing bonus will continue indefinitely until the contract is amended. All right. So all of the value that may have potentially been in a signing bonus would have required compromise in other areas in the TA. And quite frankly, the JNC was correct in not making those sorts of compromises.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I just want to say thank you very much for all of you who have joined us today. We have received thousands of questions. Some of them are duplicated. We'll continue to work on putting up Q&As on the website and getting all of your questions answered. But this will conclude our live webcast. So we encourage you to, again, continue to ask those questions and get answers. Info reps are on hand in each base. There are additional JNC information sessions scheduled in each base, and local council meetings are scheduled for you to review the tentative agreement as well. So today, balloting instructions and this summary booklet is dropped in the mail to your home. This is our opportunity to move forward together and achieve all the benefits of this merger. Get all of your questions answered and then cast an informed vote by Friday, August 12th at noon Eastern Time. Access the link to the secure VoteNet site at ourcontract.org. That will begin this Friday. Thank you again. Thank you for all you do every day as aviation's first responders. Take care of yourselves and each other. And as always, fly safe.